Hello, this is John Armwood back on the Armwood Opinion channel. Haven't been well for the past couple of weeks, so I haven't made a video. Been fighting pneumonia, among other complications. A number of issues I want to talk about tonight. First of all, we are past the midterm elections. So the results were a mixed bag. On the good side, Democrats were able to take the House of Representatives from the Republicans. We're not able to take the Senate, but that really wasn't expected. Sadly, we lost two gubernatorial races in Florida and also here in Georgia. The Georgia race was very controversial because of the open and blatant voter suppression here in Georgia by the now governor-elect Brian Kemp. And his voter suppression attempts were so blatant that it just reminds me of the stories that my father told me that he heard about growing up of the 1880s and 1890s. How blatantly voting was suppressed. So it's sad to see that we're in that Sisyphean cycle in the rock of human rights. The rock of civil rights is rolling back down that Sisyphean hill. Another very puzzling and just as troubling thing happened to me last night on Facebook. We were having a discussion, and this is with a group of liberals, about health care. And it was just a remarkable discussion to me, how different our worldviews are between white liberals and people of African descent. We were talking about health care and universal health care, single payer system. And I'm looking at countries that have it. United States is one that we wanted to have it. Many of us wanted. In fact, all of us agreed we wanted to have it. But my basic point of reference is I've been to places and lived in places that have it. And their whole point of reference, in fact, one person in particular who I like very, very much, his point of reference, and I don't want to misquote him, but I believe he said the Western democracies, which to me is a euphemism for the white countries, for United States, which is white controlled, Canada, and Western Europe. And yeah, Western Europe and Canada have some form of it, but they're a small part of the population of the world that have some form of single-payer health care system. They're a much larger population of people living in democracies in Asia, like Japan, like Korea, the Republic of Korea, like Taiwan, like Malaysia. But those people didn't even come into his mind as being a reference point. And to me, that shows how implicit and how subtle cultural racism is. And I think ethnocentrism is really a better term. That's the way I was taught in college back in the early 70s. And I think it's really a better term. It's just using Europe and European culture as a reference point. It's the idea that the world began when Europeans came on the historical stage, which is relatively recently in world history, and that nothing of really importance occurs outside of that population, where Europeans exist and what Europeans have done. And it's just so bizarre to me. And because most technologies, most things we know about, if we look at the big arc of history, were created long before Europeans came out of the caves and out of the trees of Northern Europe. And it's just, or the plains of Eastern and Central Europe. It's so bizarre. I was stunned. I was shocked. I really, quite honestly, didn't know how to react to it because the frame of reference was so foreign to me. And it shows how far we have to go. And I kind of felt sorry for the one person in particular I was talking to him, because I like him a lot. But I just got the effect that he had not traveled and not been out, if outside the United States, maybe only to Europe. I've been to Europe. I've been to Asia. I've been to, parts of Central America, throughout the Caribbean. But Europe is just not particularly special to me outside of the architecture. To me, it's like very 19th and 20th century. When I think of the 21st century, I think of the Pacific Rim. I don't think of Europe. Look at the economies. The biggest economies in the world, the United States, China, Japan, then Germany, one country in Europe. I'm in the top 4. So it was just so bizarre to me. But it shows how subtle that race thinking, that ethnocentrism, that is so central to European thinking, and how much it infects our thought. It's like another friend of mine mentioned that there were no ideas in the world. This was a year ago. Another friend of mine mentioned there was no ideas in the world that hadn't come out of Europe. And again, I was stunned. And I just didn't want to even argue with it, so I just ignored it, because it just shows how poor America's education is. It just amazes me, the cluelessness of Americans. And these are good-willed people. I'm not talking about people that are not good-willed. I'm not talking about people that I don't care about. In fact, care about deeply. And it's just so sad, and it just shows how far we have to go. And it confirms what my dad said and what all my studies have said. Racism is permanent. Derek Bell, the great law professor and father of critical race studies, what he said many, many years ago, to many people's dismay, but it's permanent. These folks are not changing. The tribalism of Europeans and the idea of their supremacy, that the world waited for them to, as my John Henrik Clark used to say in the early 70s at Hunter in college, that the world waited for their appearance on the world stage for anything that happened, is still here. That idea, as preposterous as it might seem, is still here. And it hasn't changed in my lifetime, in my 65 years. That's my teenage years to now. There's been absolutely no change. It deeply saddens me and it deeply troubles me. But that my children and grandchildren have to grow up in a world where the most liberal white folks think like this. It's sad. And I just see no hope. I really see no hope. Well, that's what was on my mind, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I say I've been fighting pneumonia, so I'm not feeling particularly well, but I haven't posted in a couple of weeks, and I felt a little bad about that. And this wasn't a very happy post. And we still got to work with folks and get past a lot of these issues. But we know they're not going to change. because it's how they define themselves. It's how they see themselves. And tribalism is an incredibly deep, embedded way of looking at the world. And we just have to work with it. Please hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. If you didn't like it, you can hit the dislike button. And subscribe if you want to hear more. Alrighty, you have a good day, and I'll see you in the next video.